It looks like an ordinary shoe. Black leather, lace up, toe cap. You'd walk straight past it in a museum without a second glance. But if you knew what was hidden inside this boot, a compass, a surgical saw, a disguise, and a way home, you'd never look at a pair of shoes the same way again. Why would British engineers stitch a surgical saw into a shoelace? Why hollow out a heel to hide a compass? And why did the men who wore these have to destroy them the moment they landed in enemy territory? Here's what I'll show you by the end of this video. The knife built into this boot wasn't for killing anyone. That one fact exposes everything Hollywood has ever gotten wrong about World War II spy tools and reveals the true genius of the man who built them. Welcome to World War II Objects. Every object tells a story. To understand why this boot existed, you first need to understand the crisis that made it necessary. By 1941, the Royal Air Force was flying thousands of missions deep over occupied Europe. Bombing runs over Germany, low-level strafing missions over France, reconnaissance flights over the Netherlands. And with every mission, the same nightmare played out over and over again. A pilot takes a hit, engine on fire. He pulls the ejection handle, the canopy flies off, and he tumbles out into the freezing air above enemy territory. The parachute opens, he's alive, and then he lands. Picture the sensation: cold, wet grass under your boots, the silk canopy collapsing around your shoulders, silence except for distant artillery. You're alive, but you're also wearing a full Royal Air Force flying uniform, enormous military-issue boots, and you're standing somewhere in the French countryside with German patrols operating within miles. You are not a soldier anymore. You are a fugitive, and your feet are giving you away. That was the brutal reality RAF aircrews faced from the earliest days of the war. The standard flying boot was unmistakably military, heavy, distinctive, impossible to disguise. The moment a downed pilot tried to blend into a local village, walked into a farmhouse to ask for civilian clothes, or attempted to reach an escape line heading towards Spain, those boots identified him instantly. To any trained German eye, they screamed RAF. Here's where it gets interesting. Major Clayton Hutton of MI9, Britain's top-secret escape and evasion department, formed in December 1939, had been thinking about this problem since the fall of France. Hutton was a former journalist, a Royal Flying Corps veteran, and a man personally fascinated by escapologists. He'd once famously challenged Harry Houdini himself to escape from a locked wooden crate. That obsession with the mechanics of escape now had a very serious wartime purpose. Hutton's approach was radical. Instead of issuing separate escape tools that could be found and confiscated during a search, he asked a different question entirely. What if the escape tools were the boot itself? By 1942, he had his answer, and prototype boots were already being field tested by RAF operational squadrons flying low-level missions over France. By 1943, the design was in general issue across the RAF. Its official stores reference 2/C 917-924. But what exactly was hiding inside it? And here's what most people don't realise when they first see this boot in a museum photograph. It has two completely separate personalities. The lower section is a plain black leather Oxford-style lace-up shoe, complete with a toe cap. It looks like something a bank clerk in 1943 London might wear to the office. Entirely civilian, entirely unremarkable. The upper section is a black suede sheepskin-lined legging, zipped and buckled onto the shoe below. Together, they look like a standard RAF cold-weather flying boot. Functional, military, expected on any aircrew member. Think of it like a convertible car with a hidden panel in the dashboard. From the outside, driving it on the motorway, it looks like any other vehicle. But the driver knows there's a second layer of engineering underneath the surface, a layer that only activates when it's truly needed. That's the first genius of Hutton's design. The disguise isn't separate from the boot. The boot is the disguise. The moment a downed pilot needed to disappear, he reached into the right boot's lining and found the small folded clasp knife hidden in a pocket cut directly into the sheepskin. He used it to slice the legging away along a designed seam. 30 seconds of work. The military upper fell away. What remained on his feet was a plain leather Oxford shoe. Civilian. Unremarkable. The kind of shoe half of rural France was wearing. And here's the detail that genuinely surprises most people. Those cut-off leggings weren't thrown away either. Hutton designed them to be reassembled into a waistcoat. You're a pilot hiding in a barn in November, temperatures dropping, couldn't risk lighting a fire. But he could stay warm using the very material he'd just cut off his own feet. One object, two forms, zero wasted material. That's not just engineering. That's the thinking of someone who understood that every gram of weight and every second of time was a matter of life and death. But the knife and the disguise were just the beginning. Now here's where the real engineering genius reveals itself, because the visible parts of the boot were almost the least impressive features. The heel itself, 1 inch of stacked leather, attached by hobnails. To anyone searching you, it's just a heel, but Hutton designed hollow compartments within the heels and soles specifically to carry miniature compasses and folded silk escape maps. Consider what that means for a moment. You've just bailed out over occupied France. You have no radio, no weapons, no papers. You don't know exactly where you are. But under your feet, in the heel of your boot, is a compass that can orient you to north, and a silk map so thin it makes no visible bulge, printed with the escape routes that could get you to Spain, Switzerland, or a resistance contact. The compass didn't need to be large. It just needed to point north. And silk maps, which MI9 had been producing since the earliest days of the war, could fold down to the size of a postage stamp. The entire intelligence package a pilot needed to begin his escape was hidden in the structure he walked on. But Hutton went further still. The shoelaces of the 1943 Pattern boot were magnetized. Not decoratively, functionally. A magnetized lace. I'd laid flat on a surface and suspended from its centre, would swing and settle pointing north, functioning as a backup compass needle in the same way as a magnetized razor blade laid on water. You didn't need to unpack anything, activate anything, or reveal anything hidden. Your compass was literally threaded through your boot eyelets, visible to any guard, indistinguishable from ordinary lacing. And in certain variants of the boot, this is perhaps the most extraordinary detail. The shoelaces concealed something even more remarkable. Gigli saws. A Gigli saw is a surgical tool, a length of flexible braided steel wire originally designed by surgeons to cut through bone during amputations. Under tension, one of these wires can cut through an iron bar. Twisted into the structure of a shoelace, a Gigli saw was virtually undetectable. Prisoners in German POW camps used exactly these tools to work through window bars and cell door frames, and the men who carried them into captivity didn't smuggle them past guards. They walked in wearing them, laced around their feet, in plain sight. Remember what I said at the start about what Hollywood gets wrong? We're getting to that now. Here's the part of this story that most documentaries skip entirely, because it's not about the boot. It's about the man who made it and the strange bureaucratic war he had to fight long after the real war was over. Major Clayton Hutton was not a conventional military man. He was a journalist, an entertainer, a showman who'd spent years fascinated by illusionists and escape artists. And he operated, by his own admission, in ways that were frequently, in his own words, on the edge of the illegal. He used circuitous routes to bypass official supply chains. He commissioned manufacturers without proper authorization. He spent government money on experimental designs before anyone had approved them. And he did it all because he genuinely believed that every day of delay cost Allied lives. His classified 1942 catalogue, Per Ardua Libertas, Latin for liberty through adversity, documented the full range of MI9's escape tools in 76 pages, classified most secret, and was produced in approximately 100 copies. Those copies were handed directly to a delegation of visiting American intelligence officers in November 1942 so that the United States could build its own equivalent operation. Soon the Americans went on to create MISX, their own escape and evasion organization, directly inspired by Hutton's work. The results were staggering. An estimated 35,000 British and Allied personnel managed to escape capture or return to Allied territory during the war. Many of those journeys home began with the tools Hutton had built into their clothing, their buttons, their maps, and their boots. But after the war, Hutton tried to write his memoir, and the British government stopped him. For 8 years, security authorities blocked publication of official secret, his account of building MI9's escape program. They worried about revealing sources, methods, and still active networks. Hutton fought them through the courts, through public pressure, through appeals. He was even charged under the Official Secrets Act, appearing at Bow Street Magistrates Court, only to find that the authorities mysteriously withdrew the case before trial. He finally published in 1960. 15 years after the war ended. And even then, as researchers later noted, he made no mention of Per Ardua Libertas, the full catalogue of his own work, possibly because those details were still considered sensitive. The man who helped 35,000 people find their way home nearly never got to tell his own story. Now, the knife. The thing I promised you at the very start. Every spy film, every thriller, every action sequence set in occupied Europe shows the same thing. An agent with a hidden weapon, a knife concealed in a heel, ready to be drawn and used against an enemy soldier. The heel compartment as armoury, the boot as weapons cache. That's not what this was. And the knife in the 1943 Pattern RAF boot, documented in Imperial War Museum Object Record 30001839, was a small clasp knife with a single narrow blade. Its entire purpose, as recorded by the IWM, was to cut away the legging section of the boot, not to wound a guard, not to cut a throat, to remove a piece of leather so that a frightened young pilot could look like a civilian and walk to safety. The documented contents of the hollow heel were compasses, silk maps, and currency, survival and navigation tools, not weapons. The Gigli saw in the laces was for cutting iron bars in a POW camp, not for attacking anyone. The myth that boot heels hid assassination weapons comes from Cold War espionage culture. Soviet hollow coins in 1953, and American spy gadgetry in the 1960s and 70s, projected backwards onto World War II history by films and novels that found the violence more cinematic than the truth. But the truth is more impressive, because it takes far greater ingenuity to hide a way home than to hide a weapon. These pilots didn't need to be able to kill, they needed to be able to disappear. And this boot, this plain black Oxford shoe with its magnetized laces and hollow heel and hidden clasp knife, gave them exactly that. That boot in the Imperial War Museum today is Stores Reference 22/C 917 to 924. It's 1 inch of stacked leather heel. It's a piece of magnetized string laced through 10 eyelets. It's a compass disguised as footwear. It's a cartographer's library folded into a heel. It's proof that the most powerful weapon Britain gave its pilots wasn't explosive. It was invisible. Thank you for watching WW2 Objects. If you have suggestions, from escape tools to navigation instruments to field rations, drop them in the comments and we'll give you a shout out. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a story from the battlefield.